Welcome to Off the Grid, a podcast for small business owners who want to leave social media without losing all their clients.
Let's go off the grid. Okay. Let's go off the grid. Okay. I know that you really want to put your phone away. Yeah. Let's go off the grid.
Hello, and welcome to Off the Grid. I am your host, Amelia Ruby, and this is our podcast. My podcast, your podcast, our podcast, all about sharing your work online without relying on social media. Happy July, my friends. I don't know about you, but I am very happy to be easing in to the summertime. For me, it's really July when I feel that peak of summer energy. And then by August, it's totally gone again. And I'm just flattened by the heat and I can't do anything. So July is when I am out here making moves, hopping in the pool, enjoying my summertime. And I hope you might feel the same way. Although if you're one of our lovely listeners from the Southern Hemisphere, I know it is not summer for you. So seasonality is specific to where we live, which actually gets me into the topic of today's episode. So I have not done very many solo episodes this season. I've really been saving my behind the scenes updates for the Clubhouse members. You can pop over there for just $5 a month if you want to hear how I'm thinking about my business this year. But it just felt like it was time for me to come back here on the public pod and tell you a little bit about what I'm thinking and what I'm doing this summer. So I wanted to share this episode that I'm calling 3 Ways I'm Reinventing My Work Right Now in honor of what I have kind of deemed my paradigm shift summer. Now, a paradigm is a model or a very clear example of something. I often think of it as a whole way of thinking, a framework that clarifies how the world works or how something works in the world. And for me, what I have realized time and time again this year is that my paradigm for how business works, how online business works, how my business works, has been in need of some polishing, shifting, fine-tuning, radical adjustment. Basically, the way I've been doing business, even though it was so intentional, it was so suited to my talents and my joys and my needs, it just still wasn't working for me anymore. And so as I've been heading into the summer, I was like, okay, we are shifting the paradigm at Softer Sounds this summer. We are shifting the paradigm in my home office. I am shifting the paradigm of how my workday looks, of how my work relationships function, of how my website looks even. I'm really trying to bring this sort of clarifying energy to everything I'm doing in my business. At the same time, summer is not the season where I'm pushing myself to do hard things. So I let myself hold this sort of paradoxical belief of okay, this summer I am shifting paradigms and it's going to be super easy. What if this work doesn't have to be hard? What if bringing through a new paradigm for my business, a new way of working, doesn't have to be a laborious process? What if I can really usher it through with ease and grace and joy and pleasure? And so that's what I'm focusing on this summer. And I wanted to bring you into that process a bit by sharing 3 ways that I am gently reinventing my work right now. Now, before we get there, I do want to let you know that I have a little class coming up. It's happening July 15th, 16th, and 17th, and it's called Opt Out: How to Quit Meta, Google, or Amazon with Ease. Because again, the whole spirit I'm bringing to this summer is how can I make big moves through simple, soft, spacious, easy actions? And it occurred to me that breaking up with big tech is something that many off-the-grid listeners tell me they want to do. And then typically they say it to me and they say something like, but oh my gosh, it's going to be so hard. I have no energy for that. Who has time for this? It's such a big thing. It's so much work. I just get the litany of overwhelm that comes with the idea of quitting any of these major platforms, whether they be social media or Amazon Prime or Google Suite, like whatever it is, it feels really overwhelming to take steps toward breaking up with those tools. But what if it could be pretty simple? What if it could be relatively straightforward? What if we could do it together? That's the whole premise for my life right now and for this class that I'm teaching. So again, Opt Out is a 90-minute class and 3 Q&A support sessions where I will guide you through mindset shifts, step-by-step processes, and curated lists of alternate tech tools that will help you stop relying on these big tech companies and the big tech billionaires that we know are harmful to people and the planet. So if you're interested in that work and you might want to do it with me this summer, you can head to the show notes to learn more about Opt Out. I would love to see you there live, or the recordings are included with class, and we will have a little Discord server so you could move through the material asynchronously if you need to do it on your own time. And also, if you're listening when this episode comes out, there is an early bird discount code for a few more days. So if you sign up by July 4th and you use the code GETFREE, you can take $25 off registration, which means class will only cost $50 USD, which honestly, I don't know about you, but if I could feel like the deep relief that comes with the alignment between my values, my actions, and my tech tools for only $50, I would 100% do that. Of course, I'm a little biased. It's my class, obviously, but I hope to see you in class. Head to the show notes for all of the info. And now let's dive in to this episode about 3 ways that I am gently reinventing my work right now. If you happen to be new to me, if you happen to be new to Off the Grid, welcome. I'm going to give you a quick recap of what my work has been so that you can understand how it's changing. I launched my podcast studio, Softer Sounds, in July 2021. The studio grew from my years of freelance audio editing, and I kind of formalized that and turned it into a production studio. You can hear more about that journey in my conversation with Sarah Jutra, all about freelancing. And over the next few years, Softer Sounds really grew. It went from being a one-person endeavor to now I have 3 contractors, an assistant producer, an editor, and a writer. And, last year the studio grossed over 6 figures in revenue. So it really went from a one-person practice that was making me a few $1,000s a month to something much bigger over the past 4 years. Alongside growing Softer Sounds, in spring of 2022, I launched Off the Grid, this here podcast. In the first season, Off the Grid was just an experiment. I was making some episodes, trying to figure out what people might want to hear from me. And at the end of that season, I taught a 3-day workshop called The Refresh. I kind of repeated that whole thing again the next year. And then I launched the Interweb in 2023, the Clubhouse in 2024, and now Off the Grid is a whole ecosystem of the show and different offerings. I teach classes, as you heard about Opt Out at the start of this episode. So now, in summer 2025, I run 2 full-time businesses, essentially. From my one little laptop in my little office in Lincoln, Nebraska. So a lot has changed, and much of that has changed very intentionally. I wanted to grow Softer Sounds. I wanted to grow Off the Grid, but also some of that has been a bit at like the whims of the universe. And it's also being impacted by the state of the world right now. So something that has happened this year is that business at Softer Sounds has scaled back pretty dramatically. In spring of 2023, we had like 24 active clients, I think, something like that. And this spring, we had about 7. So I'm really seeing like a big reduction in our podcast editing work. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I think one of them is the rise of AI-powered podcasting tools that are making it easier than ever for people to DIY their shows. I think another is the contraction in the economy that has people just pulling back on their spending, and podcast editing gets kind of cut out as a not so necessary cost during tighter seasons. And I also think it's declined because I just haven't had the mojo to be pitching clients, be out there, be really enthusiastically courting new business. In the first couple of years of Softer Sounds, that's what I was doing. And now I'm just kind of hanging out, seeing what lands in my inbox. And it's been enough to keep the studio going, but not quite enough to keep it at the size it's been or with the size of team that I have had there. Simultaneously, while there's been that sort of contraction in Softer Sounds, Off the Grid has been growing a lot. At the end of last year, I had the opportunity to be on the biggest podcast I've ever been on and probably will ever be on, which was We Can Do Hard Things with Glennon Doyle. And that brought a lot of new people to the show at the start of this year. And so the interweb is bigger than it's ever been. The Clubhouse is bigger than it's ever been. And these episodes are getting more listens than they ever have. And I have really been trying to ride that wave to follow that momentum, but also noticing that it's been hard. Like I said, I'm running essentially 2 full-time businesses under one umbrella, and that has been challenging. So that's kind of your update on what has been happening and why I'm landing here in July 2025, telling you about my paradigm shift summer and really craving a gentle reinvention of my work. Now, I call it a gentle reinvention because this is not some big before and after radical change, everything's different sort of thing. That's not my vibe in general, and I just don't have the energy for that this summer. Who does? I want to be in my tiny backyard kiddie pool situation. I don't want to be working hard at reinventing my business. So when I say I'm gently reinventing my work, what I mean is that I'm trying to sort of uproot some of the old beliefs about what my business had to be and how I had to show up in it, and even some of the newer beliefs, the things that have kind of crept in as I've seen what works, because I've noticed that sometimes the success of my business sort of quote unquote proves something to me that I don't really want to be the case. Maybe I noticed that when I worked more, I made more money, but I don't really want to function that way anyway. So my goal for this gentle reinvention is to make more of those beliefs visible to myself, maybe to you along the way, and use that surfacing, that unveiling, that releasing of those beliefs to make some changes that hopefully will have me in better alignment by the fall. Why do I say I want to be in better alignment? Well, I haven't been loving my day-to-day in my business this year. It's been challenging. There have been moments where I have really felt that synergy, that excitement, the propulsion, the momentum. And I'm yeah, I love doing this. And there have been many more moments where I'm kind of dragging my feet to my desk, trying to make myself respond to the client, trying to make myself look at my inbox. And, I'm very in tune with my energy day to day, with how I'm feeling about the business day to day. And I've had kind of 2 noticings. One is that I would like to feel more excited about my work more often. And the other is that I would like to be spending less time working. I'm spending significantly less time working than I was 2 or 3 years ago. Early days of Softer Sounds, I was definitely working 40 or 50-hour weeks. It was a full-time job in the traditional corporate sense. And now that probably looks more like 30 hours a week. I'm definitely taking more time off. I'm able to travel without taking my laptop. I'm never feeling like I'm in the grind, but I still want a different relationship to coming to work each day. And I think that that's what I want to realign. It's my relationship to the business needs some realignment. My relationship to my workday needs some realignment. And the business itself needs some realignment. I think I've added some things or made some changes or overbuilt something, overcomplicated something that doesn't need to be the case. And we can clear all that out. So hopefully that recap and clarity of my intention helped you see where we're coming from. And now, what am I going to do? What is Paradigm Shift Summer really going to look like? Well, I'm kind of thinking of this through the lens of 3 S's. I want to make everything in my creative ecosystem more simple, more specific, and more spiritual. Those are my three S's: simple, specific, spiritual. I selected those because they feel like what is needed for me right now. I think my business has gotten a little too complicated. Did you hear me say earlier that I'm running two full-time businesses under one umbrella? That's a little complicated. And so that's why I've chosen simplicity. I also think that with the growth of my audience this year, I've started operating like what I do is kind of for everyone, and it's not. So I want to be more specific. That's why I chose that value. And then I've been in conversation with a few friends recently who've reflected back to me that when I started Softer Sounds, it was a deeply intuitive and ritualized process. I was lighting candles and pulling tarot cards and like really embedded in my spiritual practices. And that has almost entirely disappeared from how I'm functioning in the day-to-day of my work at this point. So that's why I selected spiritual as the third value that I want to re-embed in my business this summer. So again, the three ways that I am gently reinventing my work right now are that I'm making everything more simple, specific, and spiritual. Now, let's go into each one of those and talk about like how I'm actually doing that, right? So far what I've tried to model is noticing how has my business changed and evolved over the 4 years of its existence, and then noticing what is not feeling right and not working anymore. What are the values I want to recenter myself in? And now that I have those, what are some actions I can take to bring those to life? So let's start with simplicity. How am I going to make everything more simple or simpler, if we want to be grammatically correct about it? Well, for this one, I'm looking at maybe three things. The first is my business model, especially at Softer Sounds. So when I started my podcast production company, I was moving out of that freelance life where people just emailed me and then we talked and I wrote them a proposal and then we just kind of went from there. I was moving away from that and I really wanted to have a super structured business. I was like, it's going to be structured, it's going to be systematized, it's going to make my life so easy. So I set up a series of packages for podcast production services and podcast editing services. And when people came to the business, they could purchase one of three tiers of a package. Essentially, you could do just podcast editing and show notes, or podcast editing, show notes, and graphics. And I loved that structure for a while. It worked really well for me, especially when people were really excited to invest in their podcasts. But what I've noticed over the past year or so is that most of my clients, the ones I loved, the ones I wanted to continue working with, really needed more flexibility in how we designed our work together. I used to make people pay for 4 episodes at a time. They had to pay before we started editing. And that worked really well to support the studio financially. But now many of my clients, just their cash flow was so tight. And so I wanted to be a little more flexible. I wanted to acknowledge that like I had great relationships with these people. I knew they would pay, but I could invoice them at the end of the month. And so I've really shifted the model from being so like structured and systematized back to being much more flexible and low key. And I'm kind of functioning like that freelancer I used to be again, but it feels easier because now I've built a business around myself and I've built a reputation and a value system around myself that really kind of resolves a lot of the struggles I had when I was freelancing the first time. So that's one way things are getting more simple, a shift in the business model. As a result of that shift, another change that I'm making, another reinvention, is that I am scaling back my tech stack at Softer Sounds. So when I built a business that really needed like structure and systematization, I invested in all of these different tech tools that cost me hundreds of dollars a year. Like they worked really well when the business looked a certain way, but now I feel like I'm paying for tools that just like do more than I really need. And so I am scaling back my tech stack. I am, opting out, like my class suggests, of certain beliefs I have about like what it means to be a business and the fact that I even need a tech stack to begin with, right? So I'm planning to move toward tools that are more like one-time payments or super low cost. Because when I look at my business expenses, I'm investing like $500 a month in different software spend. And some of that is unavoidable. Like I'm not moving my site off Squarespace, but some of that I can change. Like I don't really need all of the functionality of Dubsado anymore. I don't necessarily need the like extra tool that puts the podcast player on the website in a certain way. Like I want to cancel a number of subscriptions and then move to tools that are quickly becoming my new favorites like TidyCal or BreezeDocs. These are all like free or one-time payment tools for setting up your calendar and taking payments or getting contracts signed. And I think that that is a more simple approach to the tech I'm using in my business and suits the sort of like scaling back that I'm doing with the model and the fact that like finances are tighter this year and I'd like to be spending less money in general. So that's what I'm doing to make everything more simple. I am scaling back my business model from super structured, systematized studio to flexible freelancer again. And I am clearing out my tech stack. I am canceling a bunch of tools and using less expensive, simpler ones. And then where this kind of becomes more of a paradigm shift is I am trying to make my offerings more simple. I'm hoping to streamline them by asking myself a deceptively simple question, which is, can I actually stop doing the things I don't like doing? Because as my business has grown and I've worked with clients, and those clients very well meaningly ask me if I could do things to support them, the things that they need done and are happy to pay me to do, I've often said yes. I'm like, yeah, I'll make videos of your podcast, or yeah, I'll redesign your Notion workspace for you, or yeah, I can probably just like write up a quick email for that. All of those asks are perfectly valid. And the fact that I said yes is fine. But I have just found myself more and more over the past year or so doing things that I don't really like doing. And even though I put out there that like Softer Sounds is an audio first studio and we don't do video, I'm doing more and more video. And I definitely have this mindset of like, I need to make money. And if this is what people will pay me for, I'll do it. But I want to sit with this question more of, can I stop doing the things I don't like doing? What would that look like in my business? Like, what would immediately go away? What would go away over time? And could it be really simple? Because I do feel like there's this way where I have built a business with the sort of like shoulds I've been told, right? Like you should have 3 tiers of services and people will most often buy the middle one. This is sort of like a business truism. But I'm like, what if I just did audio editing and I didn't do anything else for people? I don't know if I'm going to do that anytime soon. And if you're a client listening to this, don't worry, I'm not dropping your show notes or your video support or anything like that. But I think that this question is going to lead me toward more simplicity in my business. So that is the first gentle reinvention. I am making everything more simple by simplifying my business model, simplifying my tech stack, and simplifying my offerings. Check, check, and check. Okay, let's move on to our second value, our second gentle reinvention. And that is that I am making everything in my business more specific. So, as I mentioned before, as the audience for Off the Grid has grown, I have felt some pressure to be for everybody. And some of that pressure has been internal and some of it has been external because I get emails from people who, aren't business owners, but love Off the Grid and like want me to do more general public stuff. Or, I wrote a book this spring that will be coming out in the fall. And I had this idea in my head that like, this is a book for everybody. Everyone could love this book. It's going to break through and I will make it mainstream. And I had to be like, no. Because in the process of writing the book, when I put that pressure on it, I was like, I don't know how to write anything for everybody. I am not a mainstream kind of girly. Like, that is not my vibe. I like to be a weirdo. I like to be a bit of a freak. I like to do things in a sort of like offbeat, on the margins way. I just always have, either by necessity or choice. So this sort of pressure to mainstream, to be for everybody, manifested in this general anxiety and dis-ease. And that's why I need to make everything more specific. That's why I want to make everything more specific. And my guiding question for this is, how can everything I create or sell be for someone, like a specific person that I have in mind? And sometimes that person is me, and sometimes that person is somebody in the interweb, and sometimes that person is someone I know elsewhere, or a peer or a friend. But I'm really trying to narrow in on who is this for and what problem does it solve for them. And this has really helped me with my book process. When I was really struggling with writing the book and feeling really insecure and uncertain about it, I had a really illuminating conversation with my friend Grace, where I realized that I was thinking of this book as kind of like a golden retriever, like man's best friend. Everybody loves them. Very cute, little puppy flopping around. But I'm not a golden retriever. My book's not a golden retriever. We're way more of like a black cat slinking through the house. And people who love cats love cats, and they're going to love this book. And those who don't, it's okay. It's just like not for them. And so again, this gentle reinvention is about making everything more specific, allowing myself to be even more true to myself, allowing myself to release this idea that the things I do should be for everyone. That's the big paradigm shift here. Nothing's for everyone, and I need to redesign some of my thinking around this, or my feeling, or my actions around this. And in terms of a few specific things I'll be doing to make everything more specific, well, I think that what this might look like is actually returning to my personal website, ameliafruby.com, and seeing how I can really show up there, not as a sort of like conglomeration of all the things I've ever done, because right now my personal website is just kind of an about page with a long list of stuff on it, but more as like an integration of everything I've done. I've started thinking of calling myself a social media critic, which I think I am. And that's way more specific than how I refer to myself now, which is writer and podcaster. Those things are true. They are roles that I take on. They are the mediums that I use. But what I do is be critical of social media. And I think that the more specific I can be about the what I do, not just the how I do it, will really benefit me and my businesses. So ameliafruby.com, check that space. Over the summer, I think I will be reimagining what it looks like. And that's how I'm making everything more specific. And finally, my third value, the third ethos that I am gently reinventing my work around, is that I'm making everything more spiritual. Now, this is already kind of snuck in through the other two. When I talk about being more genuinely myself, or when I talk about, the lessons I've learned about not being for everyone or not overcomplicating things, like those are also spiritual lessons. And I think that how this will look in my business will begin with what I mentioned earlier, where I want to bring back the daily, weekly, monthly rituals in my business. I want to do my monthly money magic ritual again, instead of just like haphazardly categorizing transactions in QuickBooks while I'm in line at the grocery store. I want to light a candle at the start of every week and pull a few tarot cards to see what might come through for me. I want to be communing with my business spirit again. I want us to go on walks together. When I started Softer Sounds, I did a really kind of intensive ancestral ritual, and I went to a number of cemeteries around where I live to convene with my literal ancestors. And I think it's time for me to get back to that. I haven't been to any of those cemeteries in like 3 years. And I think the ancestors can tell, and I can tell. So I want to bring back those spiritual practices. Now, if you're listening to this and you're like, Amelia, I don't even have spiritual practices. How would I make my business more spiritual? Well, one, it's a question of do you want or need to? And two, there are some great episodes of the podcast here. You can go back to our Halloween time episode from last year where Bridget, Cecily, and Ash offered us 3 magical rituals for our businesses. I will be listening to that again as I step into this more spiritual era of my work. You can also listen to my episode with Sarah of Hawthorne Tarot about radical imagination, or you can go back to my episode with Pascal about cultivating creative resilience, or my chat with Megan Leatherman about sacred labor. There's a lot of great magical, spiritual resourcing on the podcast feed. And we also have classes on that inside the interweb. So you could join the waitlist to get in there this summer and come to class, explore with us, deepen your spiritual practice inside of your business. And that is what I will be focusing on. I think the deeper paradigm shift here for me is that when I think of working on my business, I tend to think of like hard work. It's very like 7 dwarves, like hi ho, it's off to work we go. Okay, maybe not so much like that, but that's kind of me when I get out of bed every morning. And instead of perceiving it as hard work and effort, I would like to flip that on its head and imagine it as like a softening and leaning back. And I want to remember that business isn't just about like the strategies I build in my brain. It's also about the intuition I cultivate that makes decisions for me, the messages I channel, perhaps, the spirits I call in. There are many different forms of spiritual practice, but I think that I want to shift this paradigm for myself where it's not that I'm working hard and thinking of the most brilliant strategies, but I'm actually like relaxing and receiving the messages and the needs that come through. Because some of those messages and needs, like they come directly from all of you listening, right? Like you, dear listener, may land in my inbox with exactly what my business needs this summer, and I welcome that. And I will be in this more spiritual receptive mode so I can actually receive it. At least that's what I'm working on. So those are the 3 ways that I am gently reinventing my work this summer. I am stepping into this new paradigm where everything is more simple, specific, and spiritual. I am releasing some of the beliefs I've had about business, such as that everything needed to be systematized and embedded in complicated tech tools, or that everything could be for everybody and I should appeal to them all so that I can be a mainstream success, or that working hard with my big brain was the best way to guarantee a certain revenue or metric in my business. We're releasing all of that in favor of making everything more simple, more specific, more spiritual. And I guess when I say we there, I should speak from the I just for myself. That is how I am reinventing my work this summer. You, dear listener, may in fact need the opposite of what I need. Your business may need a few more systems, may need to get a little more complicated. It may need to be a little more general. Maybe you like hyper niched and you're like, actually, this isn't working. I'm too specific. And maybe you have really been tuning in and cultivating your spiritual practice, but you're like, in fact, what I need is a business strategist because the tarot cards, they are not guiding me anymore, right? So I am sharing what I am doing for my paradigm shift this summer, the ways that I am gently reinventing my work in the hopes that by the fall or the next year or the upcoming years, my business will be more aligned with where I am right now, with what I need and with what all of you need, with what the community needs. Because the business is just where we convene together. It's a vessel for those transactions and transformations. Okay, I think that is all I have for you today. I have really enjoyed returning to the mic for this solo episode. And if you've enjoyed it, There are so many more ways that you can hear from me more often. I invite you into the Off the Grid Clubhouse, which is our paid podcast and newsletter on Substack. I'm doing a lot of sharing there this summer. So come on through, hear more about my business, more about my book, more about the marketing experiments I've been doing this summer, including clear financial details on how they've been going. I don't really talk about that on the public feed anymore, but I do share it in the Clubhouse. Or if you want to meet other amazing Off the Grid listeners, maybe your business needs more connection or more referrals or more visibility. You can find all of that inside of the Interweb, which is our annual membership for launching, growing, and reinventing your business beyond social media. And if your tech stack plays into any of this, if you want to paradigm shift how you approach big tech companies and what you quote unquote have to do online, I do invite you to join me in Opt Out, which is happening July 15th through 17th. And you can find out all about that in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Off the Grid. And for now, I am going to sign off and go get in the pool. I hope you do something equally soft, sweet, and supportive for yourself. And until next time, I will see you off the grid. Thanks for listening to Off the Grid. Don't forget to grab your free Leaving Social Media toolkit at offthegrid.fun/toolkit. This podcast is a Softer Sounds production. Our music is by Melissa Caitlin Carter of Making Audio Magic, and our logo is by Natelier Studio. I'm your host, Amelia Ruby, and until next time, I'll see you off the grid and on the interweb.
Let's go off the grid. Okay. Let's go off the grid. Okay. I know that you really want to put your phone away.